Tom, my name's Kim, and my biggest concern is health insurance. I lost my husband just shortly a year ago to brain cancer. He was my health care carrier. I could not collect on his Social Security until I turned 60, which I just did in October. My issue is, though, my money that I would get from his Social Security goes right into health insurance. I still have nothing. I have a hard time finding a job at my age, and who's going to carry me with health insurance? So that's my biggest concern, because that money for Social Security goes right into health insurance. Besides a $9,000 deductible, $80 to see a primary care doctor, $160 to see a specialist. You know, thank God, and I ended up taking myself off all my medications because
Really?
I did, because I could not afford them.
Oh.
But the good thing about it is, too, is I've been taking weight off, you know. I know it was my choice and stress and what have you, but my health has been good. I mean, my blood pressure's down, everything's good. So that's a positive plus for me. But there's people out there that can't afford their insurance. Besides, I have a disability grandson, and things, he needs a nurse 24/7. Thank God my daughter is a nurse, but the nurse times are being taken away from her. Supplies are being taken away, and she can't afford it with 6 children. And so my biggest concern is health insurance.
So let's talk for a second about healthcare. I view healthcare in the 21st century, affordable healthcare, as a right for every single American. It has to be. And we pay twice as much for healthcare as a country as any other country in the world. And it's a perfect example of how American corporations own the American government. So I know that one of the big questions here is Medicare for all or a public option to join Medicare. And I'm for a public option for every single person to have a right to health care, because I think the two things we need to do are to use the federal government to drive down the cost through drug pricing, through insurance costs, and through the private hospitals. You know, what you're talking about is having health care that's unaffordable is not health care. Having to choose between medications and rent is not health care. And health care in the 21st century in America is a right. It's not something people should have to dream of or hope for or fight for. It's a right that absolutely everybody deserves, including people specifically like your grandson with disabilities. So I look at this very simply as the federal government is not doing its job if you're telling that story. And so, very simply, I don't know if you guys know this, I am a competitive person. I view myself as on the team of the American people. And if I see drug companies charging us 10 times more than they charge Canadians, I get very competitive very fast. It's not right. It's just not right. I know it. Look, there's a drug that the drug companies charge us literally 100 times more than they charge Australians. It's not right. And that's my point about taking back our government. We are going to have to fight these people. And I don't have any qualms about it. I know we can beat them, but they're very powerful because of money in politics and lobbying. They own the government. Who else would charge you 10 times more for a drug than they charge a Canadian, and then pass a law saying you can't drive to Canada and buy the drug? It's amazing. So I go back to a couple things. Healthcare is a right. People with disabilities, we should be funding the services that have been passed but aren't funded to make sure that they're treated fairly. But really what we need to do is drive down the cost and make sure it's affordable for every single American. And there's no reason not to do it other than drug company profits. That's all this is really about. And that's why I said it's cruelty. You know, when you hear a story like this, people can talk about fancy academic words and programs and all this stuff, but really what it is is companies that want to make money and people who don't want to pay taxes. That's all it really comes down to, against the lives of American citizens. And that is not a tough call for me. I am 100% on the side of American citizens being treated fairly and their rights being observed. And it really does come down to that. That is a story which, that's why I said, I hear these stories and I think, I can cry or I can get in a fist fight. Which one do you want me to do?
You've done enough crying.
Yeah, okay, then I'll get in a fist fight for you, okay?
Good morning. My name is Chris. So
Chris.
I've got an example for you of what you're talking about with corporations trying to maintain their own profits. A year ago, our airwaves were just peppered with ads that were completely false information against green energy. And the
Really?
groups that were doing it were utility groups forming together but not stating their actual identity, forming together with a group. And then, I mean, it was one commercial after another, your telephones, internet. It was a very aggressive campaign of false information. At the same time, my husband and I were preparing to put solar panels on our roof and went around and talked with some of the neighbors who fill their yards with Trump signs, to just give them true, factual information about why we're doing this and how it would be advantageous for them and just a win-win-win. But that's what you're up against, and for all those who saw those ads, it generates the ideas that pit neighbor against neighbor. We've got to have something that keeps people from spreading false information.
So, Chris, I like to go to church late on Sunday. I like to go to a 6 p.m. church service. And so one of my friends is an 85-year-old widow with 4 kids in their 50s. And she used to run a ranch in Nevada. But coming out of church at 7 o'clock, she said, "Hey, Tom, can I talk to you for a sec?" And I said, "Sure." She said, "One of my kids won't speak to me." So she obviously lives for her kids and grandkids. She's an 85-year-old widow. She's incredibly close to her kids. And one of them won't speak to her. I said, "What's the matter, Georgia?" And she said, "Do you think I should stop watching Fox News?" And I said, "Let me ask you a question. Do you only watch Fox News?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you something. You don't have any facts or any vocabulary for a conversation with your daughter," because her daughter's a friend of mine too. And I said, "If you only watch Fox, then honest to goodness, you're going to have a hard time reestablishing a relationship with your daughter. Because there is something going on here where there is a alternative universe that doesn't include any real facts and is an attempt to justify this corporate takeover of our government and make the world seem a way that it isn't." And we're seeing it every single day on every single issue. And so when I think, you look at clean energy, look, clean energy is cheaper than fossil fuel energy. We are in Iowa. 42% of the energy generated here comes from windmills. Those windmills are paid for by Warren Buffett. He's a nice guy, but he isn't doing it to be nice. He's doing it because he's making more money with windmills than any other way he can think of. Iowa's going to go to 100% clean energy when the rest of the country is going to be sitting here going, "It's impossible. We can never do it." We can definitely do it. I mean, one of the things that's true here is we have the technology and the capability to get clean and to do it in a way that provides cheaper energy, faster growth, millions of more jobs, better paid jobs, and clean air and clean water. The issue is companies who think they can make more money polluting than being clean. That's the only issue here. And so this is a political problem. It is not a technology problem. It is not a capability problem. This is a question of exactly what Chris said, win, 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 or lose, lose, lose with profits. It's pretty straightforward.
Something I
What's your name, sir?
Ron. Something I like what you said I've been voting since the late 50s, and I've heard term limits. I hear it. That's it. Wouldn't that be nice, you know, put the government back in the hands of the people? We can vote these people. Otherwise, they stay for life.
And they get relationships that are two-way that keep them in for life. And there's, you know, it's just true, you know, it's just true. If we want change, we need new and different people in charge. And for goodness sakes, it's so long overdue. People are scared. No one will even come out. Listen, there's no one running for president who will even use the word term limits to say, I'm against term limits. They won't say they're for term limits. It's like the old days when my mother used to put ivory soap in my mouth for saying the wrong words. Term limits, boom. It's time for the people to take back this country. It really is so long overdue. And if we don't do it, we're going to get exactly what we're getting right now, which is a corporately controlled country at the expense of Americans like Kim and Chris and all the rest of us.
How do you, Mike, how do you get that term limit? It has to be a popular vote, doesn't it? Because you're not going to get those clowns in there to vote against them staying. So how do you get that thing to go in a popular vote?
Here's what we're going to, part of this starts, believe it or not, in this room. I mean, a presidential election is partly about deciding what matters. You know, what is the thing that the country needs to do together? What is the question in front of us? That's why I was running, because I was sitting here going like, I know how important healthcare is. It's life or death, actually, is what healthcare is for everybody. But the question is, how are we going to get affordable healthcare as a right for Americans? And to me, it comes back to this question of how do we get the government to change? How do we get term limits and direct democracy? How do we get a change so that people can see structurally that the people are back in charge? And it starts with the election. It starts with people deciding this is the task. So for instance, if you remember back to 2008, Barack Obama ran on changing healthcare. And what did he do? We got the Affordable Care Act. It's partly about deciding what counts. So one is to decide we have to take back the government. Two, there's some things that the president can do without any kind of vote. For instance, you can get transparency and you can find people who break the rules through the Federal Election Commission, a completely moribund organization that has the right to levy fines and insist on transparency. So when people try and hide who's running the ads, when people try to pretend, you know, there's so much dark money in this system, you can make sure that's not true, and if they do it, you can find them in a way that is really punitive. This is an organization that doesn't work, but that a president can make work on his or her own. But lastly, we are going to have to get this structural change, and you're never going to get, I agree with you, Congress people, you're going to go, okay, you're not in here for life, and they're going to be like, what? I'm definitely in here for life. What are you talking about? So we're going to have to do it through the people. And I think, you know, to me, the biggest structural change to get everything is to have direct democracy, is to have the ability for the people to put something on the ballot, vote for it, and turning it into a law. Because that is the thing that's going to enable every single thing to happen that we want to happen. And that is going to put, if you won't do it, we'll do it, in the back of every legislator.
Do you think that could be into the vote, proper vote?
Yeah. I think that's how it's going to have to go. I really do. I think that this has gotten to a level that is hard to believe. And I'll give you an example with gun violence. We have over 1 mass shooting a day. We do. We've had over 350 mass shootings this year. The country that's in second place in the world is Mexico in terms of mass shootings. 3. We have over 350. The second place country is 3. We're at a level of violence that's really off the charts. And that goes for mass shootings, but it also goes for domestic violence, places people are scared to walk the streets, and suicides. 60% of gun-related deaths are suicides. The availability of guns and the use of guns in our society is completely off the charts relative to the rest of the world. And we have never gotten real federal legislation. And the question is, how is that possible? But it goes, how is it possible that we pay twice as much for healthcare? Every other country in the world negotiates with drug companies but us. That's an amazing fact. Why would the government not try and get low prices for American citizens for drugs? So we're really going to have to make structural change. And we're going to have to get someone in charge who isn't beholden to any of these companies. And honestly, I'm that person. Because I have no allegiance whatsoever, and I have a decade-long history of beating them and fighting them. People say, "Will you promise not to take money from corporations?" I was like, easy to say yes, because under no circumstances would they give me a nickel. It's really, we're in a situation where no one wants to admit it, but it's a straight-up fight. And we're going to have to win. And if we win structurally, we're going to win across the board, is my point. And that's why this is what this is really about. If we win, we're going to win everything. And that's actually what we have to do.
Hi, Tom. My name is Deborah, and I would really like to shake your hand if that's okay.
Deborah.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. I would like to just add a little bit to the term limits that you were just recently talking about. If you can get that done, do you also think that there should be no lifetime benefits for anybody in Congress?
Look, I think everybody deserves lifetime benefits is the issue. I think they deserve to be treated. Look, one of the things that I think would be fantastic is if Congress people were treated exactly the same as everybody else. If they were dealing with Kim's problems, I would be so happy, because it would be like, okay, we need to change this, for goodness sakes. No, from my standpoint, they should be on the exact same program as every other American, because then they have a personal interest in getting it right.
So is that something that you would push for also?
That's the first time, honestly, I've thought about saying that, because it's a really important point. If it's hitting you and your grandkid, that's a huge incentive to do the right thing. If you have to live by the same rules as everybody else, then you can't be quite so cavalier about watching other people suffer. Yes. So I think that's actually, I'm going to go back and think about the implications of that, but on the face of it, that sounds really smart.
Well, if you think about it, if we stop paying politicians who haven't been in office for 20 plus years, if we stop paying those people, think how much more money we would have to fund healthcare, to fund education, to fund everything that we want to do.
Well, the other thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to undo the tax breaks that have been given to the richest Americans and the biggest corporations. We're going to have to. And it's really wrong. And I've been for a wealth tax for over a year. Long before I was running for president, I was like, looking at what's gone in the United States over the last 40 years is shocking. It's incredibly unjust. It's been an attack on working people, a successful, organized attack on working people for 40 years. Going back to when Ronald Reagan broke the air traffic controller strike, there has been a successful, concerted, organized attempt to take away the rights of working people that stretches across this country. And you can see all of the increase in income in this country has gone to rich people and big corporations. All of it. So, one of the things that's been true is people say the country's grown, and we have grown pretty well in the last 40 years. But in terms of the incomes of 90% of Americans, they haven't grown. So you look at it and you go like, who cares if the country's grown if it isn't shared with the people of the country? That's not success. They've used statistics that do averages when in fact the way the money gets distributed means that for 90% of the people the average doesn't count. And it's a perfect example of how numbers can tell a false story. So I look at this and I think, I'll just give you some numbers because I looked at them personally. I mean, I was an investor for 30 years. I like numbers. If you go back to 1980 and look at the minimum wage and adjust it for inflation, right now the minimum wage, which is $7.25 in the United States, would be $11. But if you go back to 1980 and adjust it for inflation and productivity gains of American workers, because we're much more productive today than we were 40 years ago, just include productivity gains, which traditionally were included in the way that wages moved up. The minimum wage would be 22 bucks. That's amazing. It's $7.25. That's the difference of what's gone on in this country in terms of sharing the wealth. That there has been no sharing of the wealth. And I want to say one other thing. Look, we can see in the last day how this election is going to go. I mean, you saw yesterday there was a good jobs number, and Mr. Trump tweeted out, it's the economy, stupid, the old Bill Clinton line from 1992. It's the economy, stupid. Whoever the Democrat is going to have to be able to take on Trump on the economy if he's not thrown out of office, or whoever the Republican is. Because what Trump is going to say is, yes, I'm a criminal. Yes, I hate most Americans. You don't really ever want to see me again, but you can't get rid of me because I'm good for the economy. That's his campaign. He says, you can't impeach me, the economy will be hurt. Look, I spent 30 years building a business. I am a person who knows exactly what makes America prosperous. I would love to take on Mr. Trump on the economy. Whoever the Democrat is going to have to be credible to take him on. Look, he's a fake business person. He acted as a business person on a reality TV program. He actually left a series of bankruptcies behind him as a business person. And as a steward of the American economy, he's doing the exact same thing that he did to Atlantic City casinos, which is promising a lot, borrowing a lot, getting nothing substantial done, and walking away for someone else to clean up his mess. That's exactly who he is economically. And whoever the Democrat is going to have to both be able to take him on the economy and be credible about growth and prosperity as well as justice. Because he's going to run on, you can't afford to let someone who's incompetent and doesn't understand growth and prosperity be the next president. And if there's one thing in the world I think I understand, it's growth and prosperity, because for 30 years, that's what I had to think about in order to be successful as a business person. So I'm just telling you, that is what we're looking at for the next 12 months, or I guess at this point it's 11 months, is his saying that, or the Republicans saying that, and it's not true. If you think about what prosperity is in the United States, it's the success and capability of American citizens, and we should be doing every single thing to make sure that happens. If you think 5 years forward, how are we creating prosperity and capability and success? It's by the people in this room and the people across this country being capable, well-equipped, supported by the government to succeed in the 21st century. And he does the exact opposite. He cuts education, he cuts healthcare, he cuts research and development, all in the name of short-term juices to the economy that only go to the richest Americans. He's a disaster economically. But somebody's going to have to make that case, who's credible, who understands what's really going on, and can convince the American people that actually building prosperity is something the Democratic Party does, not Republicans.
Hi, my name is Leslie. I'd like just a moment of your time on views on the Electoral College system.
So, I'm against it. Look, the Electoral College system was put in to protect, originally to protect slave states. And I'm somebody who believes one person, one vote. And so, look, I think eventually we'll get rid of the Electoral College system, and I think we'll have a more, democratic way of doing it. So I'm straightforward. I think there's a sense in this country that somehow that will hurt small states. I don't think that's true. It's one person, one vote. And so what's happened is, if you look at the country, there are somewhere between 7 and 11 swing states, and people running for president only pay attention to those states. So they don't pay attention to states that they think are going to go one way or the other at all. And that doesn't seem to me to be fair for somebody running for president. And so my opinion is, I want everybody in the United States to get a fair listen. And so I would push for getting rid of the things that stand between us and what I think of as a fairer democracy. And that's one of them.
I got a question about lobbyists.
What's your name, sir?
Don Rager.
Nice to meet you.
Anyway, the lobbyists, how can they control everything? There should, anybody that takes money from a lobbyist should have his name reported.
It's terrible. I'm not opposed to corporations succeeding. I believe in a vibrant, competitive, innovative private sector, and I'm not opposed to them having representatives to go in to explain their case to legislators. It's the money.
Yeah, if they take money from them, that should be reported.
I agree. And the way that lobbying works is it's a way of not making it clear where the money's coming from. So that, I've talked to a lobbyist, not in Iowa, but in a state legislature out west, who told me, who was a friend of mine, who said, we can have a campaign where we figure out what money we need to give to which legislatures and pretty much secure the outcome we want. And I was like, you're kidding. You're like, no. And when I went in, I'll tell you another story. I went door to door earlier this year before I was running for a student borrower's Bill of Rights in California. So just Democrats, and just asking that when people call up student borrowers that they tell the truth, that they explain to them what's in their interest, and that there be a place in the state legislature where student borrowers can call to get facts. And it seems like that's the minimum you would think would possible. You can't defraud student borrowers. And remember, student borrowers are just trying to get an education and be better citizens. They're not doing something heinous. They're doing something good. The lobbyists from banks and servicing companies had been in those offices every single day for 2 weeks. They're big givers. And see, these are Democratic legislators. And they would turn to me and go like, do you really care about this? And I was like, do I care about young people in the United States trying to get an education and become better citizens and that not be mortgaged for the rest of their lives to some loan sharks? Yes. And they looked at me like, really? For this reason. Because there was someone in their office who they knew not only did they owe something to from the past, but they were counting on in the future, and they knew that if they disappointed them, they might support someone against them. So it's the money. And getting that out of this system is really critical.
Hi, Tom. My name is Nick. My dad told me a lot about you, and he told me a little bit about the way you've spent a lot of money to help poorer people kind of get back on their feet. I believe it's like a low interest or no interest bank. So I guess my question for you is about like, how would you implement those programs at the federal level, or motivate governments at the state level to spend money in the interest of working people? You hear a lot about like free college. I know that's a big debate around in the Democratic Party as well, but how can you make that a central campaign message? Because I would agree with Joe Biden when he says, show me your pocketbook and you'll show me your values. And you fought very hard for democratic values for a decade. So I appreciate that. I just kind of want to know.
What we do?
Yeah, how would you do that?
What's your name?
Nick.
Nick, okay. So Nick, my wife and I started a community bank 14 years ago. And we started it because we thought banks weren't fair to low-income areas and working people. And so the idea is, if they're being denied the kind of capital to support every part of their life, then we can go in and set up a bank that's designed for economic justice, environmental sustainability, and supporting businesses owned by women and people of color. Places that have been basically devoid of economic support. And we put the money, we don't ever get the money back. The bank is now over $1 billion. We started with zero, it's over $1 billion, and it grows 20 to 25% a year. But we can use the money to make more loans or to give it away to the community, but we can never get it back because we want it to be purely mission-driven. Look, that is what we believe in, enabling people to have enough financial and governmental support so they can create the life that they're capable of and dream of. That's the American dream, right? From start to finish. And that's really what we're talking about. Get the education that you want to see what you can do with your life. It's not about the state running your life, it's about you getting a chance to make your life. Get the health care you need so you can be healthy to live the life you want. Get support if you have a good idea for a business, regardless of who you are or where you're from, get support. A living wage. Look, it drives me crazy that people aren't paid fairly in this country and that they're not allowed to organize in unions. And that I would say to people, okay, if you don't believe in organized labor, you walk into Walmart and you negotiate your wage and see how that works out. Because we know it's not going to work out. You know, Walmart workers get $6 billion a year worth of SNAP, which is food stamps. That means the American taxpayers are subsidizing the richest family in the country $6 billion a year to their workers because they don't pay them a fair wage. That's an amazing fact. And it goes across this country. So my opinion is, yeah, I would do it. I would support community banks around this country to do what we do because I think there's a gigantic multiplier effect. A gigantic multiplier effect, and we measure every single loan for impact on the community. How many jobs does it create? You know, what positive impact? We've supported 6,600 units, 6,600 units of low-income housing in the last 3 years. We make fair used car loans because one of the places where working people get ripped off is everybody needs a ride to get to work. And you put together a used car salesman with a complicated financial instrument and what you get is a ripoff. And so we said, okay, we'll do that on a fair level so people don't get ripped off. This is a question, and you know, you look at student loans. The average rate on a student loan held by the government is 6%. The average rate on a student loan held by a bank is over 10%. If you do the math, you're going to pay back that loan multiple times. Why is that true? How is it possible that students, first of all, aren't paying 1% or less? So if you have a loan, you pay it back one time. Second of all, why aren't we supporting students so that it doesn't cost so much? And third of all, if you go work for some sort of community project like the military, where this does happen, or being a teacher where this is supposed to happen but it doesn't, or a social worker or a nurse, why don't you get your student loan wiped away? There's so many different ways to handle this so that it doesn't become this gigantic burden on people who are just trying to get an education and be productive Americans. It's the idea that we're loan sharking young people trying to get an education so they can be more productive, which is what we ask every single young person to do, is completely contradictory. But it makes a ton of sense for the banks. Look, there's something going on in this country. We've overcomplicated this. We should start supporting Americans in living the lives we're trying to create for ourselves, because that's how we're going to succeed as a country. And that's the only way we're going to succeed as a country. And everything else is going to mask the cruelty that's actually going on for Americans right now, and that has got to stop.
And this is going to be our final question.
Hi, Tom. My name's Tom, too. So I
can remember that, Tom.
Yeah, and I really want a T-shirt, so.
Yeah, I bet you want several.
Well, I mean, one would be fine. But anyways, I wanted to comment. The fact is that I think you've been really ahead of the ball by, pushing this impeachment thing and I really appreciate it, because, 100 meetings with the Russians that were documented by the FBI, Manafort passing polling data and then the WikiLeaks thing and Roger Stone, my God, it's unbelievable. But I really wanted to mention about farming. I'm not a farmer, but I know a bunch of farmers, and I know farm bankruptcies are up. I know there's only like 5% of the population, maybe less, that are farmers. But the fact of the matter is that they're really getting thrown under the bus, you know, by this trade war. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, they're going to continue because Trump's not going to deal with China for the rest of the year or for the next couple of years. Maybe they're going to lose their, you know, markets in China, which is huge, right? So the fact of the matter is that I want you to kind of approach that, and I really think that needs to be shouted from the rooftops because Iowa farming is a big deal, right? So also I wanted to ask you a real quick, easy one. How do you know if Trump is lying?
His lips are moving.
Thank you, thank you.
Come on, I got 2 older brothers. I know that one. Let me talk for 1 second about farming, because it actually goes back to this question about economic competence. Look, his tax plan that they put through is the biggest attack on working Americans in history. It's $1.2 trillion to the biggest corporations and richest Americans. And that is going to come back and attack working people like nobody's business. But the other thing that he's done is his trade war. His trade war is a failure. It specifically hurts Americans. It's got nothing done, and it's killing farmers, and specifically Iowa farmers. I would get rid of the trade war on day one. Literally, it's a mistake. You know, the old saying, when you're in a hole, the first rule is stop digging. I would end it on day one. I would get rid of the waivers that he's given to oil refineries not to use ethanol. We need biofuels. We need ethanol. We need to get better at it. The only way to get better at it is to do it. I would do that. Look, if you look at the numbers on farmers, in the last 5 years, their incomes have gone down between 50 and 75%. There's a concentration issue. The percentage that farmers get of the retail value of produce is at the lowest that it's ever been measured, and it's gone down 17% in the last 5 years. Look, all I'm saying is they have lower prices, and they're getting a lower percent of what they produce, of those lower dollars. And that means their income's 50 to 75%. We're going to have to end the self-inflicted wounds that Mr. Trump has inflicted on farmers. And the other thing that's true is this, and it specifically applies to Iowa. We're going to have to deal with climate. And one of the groups of people who are going to be leaders in this are farmers. Because we're going to have to sequester carbon in the land. And guess who owns the land? The same people who get paid to put up windmills. So I'm not saying we have all the answers, but in partnership with farmers, we're going to have to, that's going to be a huge part of actually solving our climate crisis. Farmers are going to be providing services and getting paid for it, as well as products. We're going to partner with farmers across this country, and specifically in Iowa. But it's a perfect example. Mr. Trump actually doesn't understand American working people or care about them, and he actually doesn't understand American farmers at all. And his answer is to screw up the economy and then give them 12 billion last year, 18 billion last year, 12 billion this year. That doesn't make the system actually work. If you're not succeeding and you're getting then a government subsidy, you don't go and buy a new tractor. You know, for the rest of the system that depends on an actually healthy economy, there is no healthy system anymore. It's just a government payment. So really what we're going to have to do, he doesn't know what he's doing economically. We are an Atlantic City casino to him. He is doing exactly the same thing. He is going to leave us the way he left the Taj Mahal, the Trump Taj Mahal, empty, gutted, and bankrupt. And actually what the United States has to do is have us succeed together. Support each other, have a government that understands that people succeeding is how America succeed, not corporations succeeding. And it's a completely different way of thinking about prosperity, and it's the only way that actually works for human beings, and it's a completely different way of thinking about the rights of Americans and the relationship between government and American citizens. And that's exactly what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to succeed together. And that is exactly why I'm running for president. Because if we do that, we are going to be a proud nation again. We are going to lead the world again. That is what we're here for, and that is what I'm here for. Thank you very much.